morning, you guys. Well, it's actually, I typically post at 3 p.m. so it's probably maybe not the morning when you're watching this, but I'm filming this in the morning. It is the first Sunday of football season and I am literally so excited. Hashtag Skol Vikings. I've got my purple eyeshadow on. We are ready for game day today. Therefore, I'm not sure if it is like the excitement of the first football Sunday of the season that is causing all this excitement, or if I'm truly like, I mean, I am talking like I am the most excited I think I've ever been to film a video on my channel. I had so much fun putting this together, so much fun ranking these palettes. But today we're gonna be ranking the 10 newest palettes that I have tried. And it's not just like willy-nilly. I mean, it kind of is, I guess, maybe. Not just like willy-nilly ranking. Like, I have a whole ranking system that I have created based on the feedback that you guys gave me. About a month ago, I posted on my community tab asking what the most important things were when making a decision for you guys about how you decide to buy a palette, whether that be quality, color story, etc. And based on that feedback, I created a whole palette, like official palette ranking system for me and my channel. And I'm gonna be ranking these palettes with like a numerical value tied to them. And that's how we are ranking them today. I have 10 palettes, as I mentioned, to rank for you. So if you're interested, stay tuned. First, if you have yet to subscribe to my channel and you like project painting content, palette themed content, or just chit chatting about makeup, or if you love football, hashtag Skol Vikings, if I haven't said it already. I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel before moving on. And other than that, let's get into the video. All right, you guys, before we jump into the ranking, and we're gonna go from the bottom to the top, I am going to let you know my palette ranking system and how I came up with this. So as I mentioned, I posted on my community tab and I asked you guys, what are the most important things that you are looking for when making a palette purchase? And I took all of that feedback and I created four separate categories for this ranking system. So the top most important thing that you guys said that you cared about when making a palette purchase was the quality. So I've decided to give quality a total of up to 7 points that you can earn for quality. And within quality, we are talking about blendability. How easy is it to blend? Are shades patchy? Do they layer well together? We are also referring to any fallout. Does the palette have a lot of kick up? How intense are the shimmers? What is the saturation? What is the color payoff? These are all things that are landing under the quality category. And like I said, a palette can earn anywhere from 1 to 7 points for quality. Next up, you guys seem to be super passionate about color story, so I decided to give color story a total of 5 points that a palette could earn. And when we are talking about color story, there is such a wide array of things that fall under this color story bucket, and really the color story is so subjective to the person that is ranking the palette. So I understand that like one color story could be super unique to me and maybe you guys would be like, that's not unique at all. But in terms of color story, we are talking about things like themes. Is it wearable? How many shades out of the palette are you using? Are you only using 50% of the shades? Can you get use out of 90% of the shades? Is the palette something that is everyday appropriate, something that you feel comfortable wearing to work? Or maybe it's a rainbow palette that you're not gonna be wearing to work, but like, can you get use, or is the whole palette usable under that like rainbow umbrella? Is there a theme to the palette? Is it easy to create a whole look just using that palette alone? Is it unique to my collection? Is there a variety of textures and tones and colors? Are there repeating shades? All of these things would fall under the color story category. And like I said, color story, you can get up to 5 points per palette. And then the next category is packaging. This seemed to be number 3 for you guys. And packaging, we are talking about, is it easy to store? Is it gonna get super messy? I'm thinking of like the ABH, like Modern Renaissance and Soft Glam, like with that velvet texture. Like, it's cute, but it gets so dirty. Is it super bulky? Is it cute? Is it aesthetic? All of these things would fall under the packaging category. And for packaging, you can get anywhere from 1 to 3 points. So under these 3 categories, or these 3 umbrellas, which seemed to be the top 3 most important to you guys, a palette can earn up to 15 points. And then I wanted to, price was also super important to you guys, and price is obviously super important to me as well when I think through my palette purchases. So when I started to create this ranking system, I wanted to give the palette anywhere from 1 to 15 points, and then I was thinking I was going to subtract the dollar amount of the price per ounce per palette. But as I started to do that with these 10 palettes, there are some palettes that are just so expensive when it comes to price per ounce that, for example, like my Pat McGrath, the price per ounce for the Pat McGrath Moonlit Seduction palette is $6.56. And so even if the Pat McGrath like had a perfect ranking, it couldn't get over like 9 point something points. So I was like, I don't know if it's working to subtract the total dollar value. I will still share that information with you guys as I do these palette ranking videos, but I decided to come up with my own like key, my own pricing key, and I will post that on the screen for you guys as well. So if a palette is less than $1 per gram of product, then that palette, like, we aren't subtracting any points. Yeah, no points at all. If a palette is between $1 and $2 price per ounce, we will subtract 1 point. If a palette is between $2 to $5 per gram, we will subtract 2 points, and anything that's $5 and above price per gram, we are subtracting 3 points from that total of 15 to give us the total official ranking number for each palette. Now within that, if I have palettes that are like tied at, say a palette, I have three or four palettes that got the ranking of 11 in this video. For those palettes, I then looked at the actual price per ounce, and the lowest ranked higher. So if it was $1 versus another palette was $2 price per ounce, the dollar value, the palette that was $1 price per ounce ranked higher than the palette that was $2 per ounce of product. And I'm super excited. I'm going to continue this as a series on my channel. I will still do my monthly palette rankings, and those palette rankings will truly just be based on like how much I enjoyed using that palette at the end of the month. But I think at the end of the year, I will do 2 separate palette ranking videos for all the palettes that I tried within 2023. One as like my official palette ranking, and then the second will be like my personal palette ranking, just because I feel like as I'm looking through these, it's pretty accurate, but I feel like my ranking could have been a little bit different than the palettes are ranked out when I did this like official numerical value tied to the palette. But I had so much fun with this. After watching this video, if there's things that you would like to see me tweak in terms of like the numerical value, if there's like little changes you want to see me make, let me know. And I'm going to keep a long running list. I've already created an official palette ranking spreadsheet, and I will continue to add these palettes to the spreadsheet as we go. Perhaps next year when I'm doing No Pan Left Behind, any palette that I No Pan Left Behind, I will also rank in this way, so we can continue to go through my entire eyeshadow palette collection to give them these official rankings, if you will. So I hope you guys enjoy it, because I'm literally so excited about this. Now that we have explained my official palette ranking system, which I think I'll also put down in the description box, just so I have a copy of it for like upcoming videos, so I'm not taking 10 minutes to describe this every single time I do an official palette ranking video. I'll leave it in the description box so you guys have that information. But we are getting closer and closer to 12 o'clock kickoff. Let's get into how I ranked the last 10 palettes that I tried. All right, you guys, my lowest ranked palette, coming in at number 10 for this grouping of palettes, I have my Natasha Denona Mini Starlit palette. This is what this palette is looking like, and the official ranking for this palette is an 8. I gave this palette a 5 out of 7 for quality. I don't really have any true complaints with quality. I just don't think it's like quite up to par with what I know Natasha Denona palettes to be. The mattes are fine, but they could be better. And then I do really like the shade Galaxia right here. And I have no issues with the quality. I just don't feel like it's like a 7 on the quality scale. Sometimes I find that Natasha Denona shadows, the mattes, can get like a little bit patchy on my eye, or they can start to wear away in like the center of my eye. So that's why I decided to give this a 5 out of 7 for quality. For color story, I gave this a 4 out of 5. And the reason being is all of these shades are shades that are like repeated throughout other Natasha Denona palettes. So there's no unique shade to Natasha Denona, like no shade, just releasing for the first time within this palette. I didn't know that going into purchasing this palette, and I may have not purchased this had I known that going in. I mean, I did, like looking at it, I loved the color story, but then I'm like, it just was nothing special on the eyes. I mean, it's 5 shades. There's not a whole lot of variety that you can do with this. So that's another reason that the color story is getting a 4 out of 5. Honestly, that's pretty good for a palette that's only 5 shades. And then in terms of packaging, I gave it a 2 out of 3, and it is really nice, sleek packaging, but being a small mini 5 pan and there's no mirror, which I do prefer in my palettes, so I give it a 2 out of 3 for packaging. And then price per ounce for the Natasha Denona Mini Starlit, it came in at $6.75 price per ounce, which is quite a bit. So it does get 3 points taken off for that price per ounce, putting the total rating for this palette at an 8, and this is my number 10 palette in this video. And then also ranking at a number 8, but it's a little bit less in terms of price per ounce, I have another Natasha Denona palette, and this is the Natasha Denona Mini Pastel palette. So like, let's break down the Natasha Denona Mini Pastel. In terms of quality, I gave this one a 5 out of 7 for quality. And the reason being is I just wasn't super like blown away by the quality. I get that this is a pastel palette, but these are like true pastels in that you're not getting a ton of saturation from these. So if you like a super light pastel, you might really enjoy this palette. There were some shades that did really like blow me out of the water. I thought were really good. I did really enjoy the shimmer formula, but in terms of mattes, unless it was the cream to powder formula, I just wasn't super blown away by the quality. So that's why I ranked that 5 out of 7 for quality. I did give this a 3 out of 5 for color story. I just felt for a pastel like rainbow palette, some of the shades, like these 2 shimmer shades, like maybe we could have taken one of these 2 out and traded it for something else. I don't know necessarily what else, but it feels like we have a lot of these like teal shades, and then I felt like between the purples and pinks, maybe there was a lot of like purple and pink. I just felt like there could have been a little bit more in terms of color story. Also, this is just not an everyday wearable palette, which I get this is a pastel palette, but just thinking through creating a full look out of this, I found it a little bit difficult. That could just be because I'm not super creative. But 3 out of 5 in terms of the color story. Packaging, I did give this a 3 out of 3. I do love the packaging. I think it's very cute. I love the sleekness of the Natasha Denona Midi palettes. You do get a really large mirror, and then I also love that you can easily take the shades out of the Natasha Denona Midi and larger palettes, and you can kind of move them around as you please. So 3 out of 3 for packaging. Okay, I just realized I did my math wrong, and this is actually a 9 instead of an 8, but in terms of price per ounce, this is $3.58 price per ounce, which would mean we are subtracting 2 points, which would get us to that 9. We were at 11, subtract those 2, and we get 9 out of a total of 15 for the Natasha Denona Pastel. So this is the number 9 palette. Coming in at number 8, we have the Moira Fun is in the Air palette, and this is also official ranking number is a 9 for the Moira Fun is in the Air. Let's break it down. So we have quality. The quality in the Moira Fun is in the Air, I gave a 4 out of 7 to. I just felt like the shimmers specifically were lacking a little bit. They were not very intense. They felt a little bit dry, a little bit crumbly, and the shimmers definitely could have been better. I did really enjoy the matte shades in this palette, especially the bright neons. I felt like were really fun. I love to use them as an inner corner highlight. I definitely like them best over a white base just because it really makes it pop. But considering the price per ounce for each shade, I felt like the quality was decent. There was something to be desired out of the metallic or shimmer shades in this palette. I did rank this a 3 out of 5 for color story, and where I docked points for color story was really just these like random cool toned shades that were mixed in. I feel like they really just should have committed, or I feel like because of the bright colors, I just don't feel like the cool tones necessarily make sense. I feel like maybe I would have enjoyed like warmer tone mattes instead of these like cool toned mattes. And then in terms of like doing a full look just using this palette, unless it was just like a one shadow like inner corner highlight, I really did struggle to kind of think through what I wanted to create for a full look. So that's why this one got a 3 out of 5 for color story. And then for packaging, I did give this one a 2 out of 3. It is quite bulky, and you have to be careful with the way that you like close the lid because of this lip right here. It doesn't always close all the way, but in terms of theming and just how cute this palette is, it's supposed to be like carnival themed, and then it has this mirror with like a ticket on it, like really cute in terms of theming, which is why I only docked the 1 point, even though it is quite bulky and annoying. So 2 out of 3 for packaging, which would put this at 9 points. The price per ounce of this palette is 73 cents, so less than $1, so no points docked for price per ounce of the eyeshadow, which leaves this palette at a total of 9 for the overall ranking. Coming in at number 7, we have my Pat McGrath Moonlit Seduction palette. This is what this one looks like, and in terms of quality, I ended up giving this one a 6 out of 7. I only docked points because Pat McGrath mattes just are not my favorite. I just feel like there's better mattes on the market, and when you're paying Pat McGrath prices, I feel like the matte should just be a little bit more buttery, a little bit more blendable. Sometimes I don't feel like they layer the best. So I docked 1 point off for that. For color story, I did give this a 5 out of 5. I absolutely love the color story. There's really nothing I would change about the color story either. These two shades may look super similar, but they are. This one's more of like a purple based red, and this is like a true reddy brown sort of shade. And I feel like both really do work for this palette. So I did give this a 5 out of 5 for color story. And then for packaging, I did dock 1 point. I gave this a 2 out of 3, and the reason being, it is really heavy luxe nice packaging, but it is a little bit bulkier. And with the Pat McGrath palettes, I love the artwork and the design on the outer packaging that they come in, but every Pat McGrath palette, every mothership palette just looks the same, so sometimes it's hard to like decipher which one I'm grabbing for. So I did decide to give this a 2 out of 3 in terms of packaging, which would put this total at 13. Price per ounce for a Pat McGrath palette is $6.56, so it does put us over that $5 mark, meaning that we do deduct 3 points for the price, putting us at a total official ranking of 10 points for the Pat McGrath, and this is the number 7 palette in the ranking. Coming in at number 6, we have the Lethal Cosmetics Wildflower palette. This one is super beautiful, very stunning, and this starts one of 4 palettes that ended with a ranking of 11, but this has the highest price per ounce. No, I did this wrong. All right, true number 6 is the Rowan quad, the Mood for Forever quad. I love the Rowan quads. I think they are absolutely stunning and beautiful. In terms of quality, I gave this a 6 out of 7, and the only reason I gave this a 6 out of 7 is because this shade right here I just don't love. I just feel like it could be better. It could be better. It looks like a little bit dry just in the way that it comes off. It doesn't feel dry, but it looks a little bit dry. So I feel like that shade could be improved just a little bit. Everything else I love the quality on, but because of the shade right here, I did dock this 1 point for quality, putting it at 6 out of 7. In terms of color story, I get it's just a quad, but I did give it a 5 out of 5 for color story. There's nothing repeating. I feel like all 4 shades make sense to one another, and I really enjoyed this palette. If you wanted to just do like a one shadow, or you wanted to create a full look with this palette, I do think it's possible. So 5 out of 5 for color story. Packaging, I did give it a 3 out of 3. You do have a nice mirror here. It's nice, tiny, and sleek for a quad. I really enjoy the Rowan packaging, so 3 out of 3 for packaging. But where this palette misses is price. So this Rowan is the highest price per ounce out of the bunch. It is $15.50. I get each of these are kind of like special cream shades, but that is so expensive. This is when I started to do a little research on this palette. This is when I was like, I need to change my ranking system, because this would be like a negative score, and I love this palette. So because this is over $5, at that $15.50 price point. This does get 3 points docked for price, which gives it a value of 11 out of 15. And this is the number 6. Then coming in at number 5 is the Wildflower palette. For this palette, I did give this one a 6 out of 7 in terms of quality. My only real complaint with quality for this is I struggled just a little bit with this blue shade right here. And then I just felt like some of the textures of the metallics were just a little bit thicker than like I thought they were gonna be. That's just like a personal thing, but I did give this a 6 out of 7 for quality. The mattes layered well together, but there's just something to be desired with the mattes. I feel like they could like step it up just a little bit. So I couldn't give it a true 7 out of 7 for quality. For color story, I did give this a 4 out of 5. And the reason being is really just that when I look into this palette, I get really confused and I struggle to create a whole look in my mind. I get that this is not a palette that I'm gonna be reaching for on days that I'm going to work, except for I will say I do really like this shade in the crease and then this shade all over the lid. I have done just that look for work. So I wasn't grading this on like everyday wearable. That's not what I purchased the palette for. And I think overall the color story is really cohesive, but sometimes I look into this and I'm like, how do I create a full look? So I decided to give this a 4 out of 5 for color story. I still think it's really, really beautiful. Don't get me wrong. But it just didn't feel right to give it a true 5 out of 5. In terms of packaging, I did give this a 3 out of 3. I love the sleek packaging. I think it's really beautiful. I love the colors. I love the design. And I also love that with lethal palettes, you can easily remove the shades and swap them out if you want as well. So 3 out of 3 for packaging. Price per ounce on the Lethal Cosmetics palettes is $2.70, meaning that this palette gets docked 2 points, putting it at 11 for its overall official ranking. And this is the number 5 palette. And at number 4, we have the Nomad Cosmetics Okavango Safari palette. I am so glad that I picked this up. I kind of went back and forth, and then I decided to pick it up, and I'm so happy that I did, because my first experience with Nomad, I wasn't super impressed with the palette, and I have gone on to purchase the Ghost Town palette. I haven't gotten around to finishing testing that, but this is what this palette looks like. In terms of quality, I did give this a 4 out of 7. And the reason being is I find, even like to the touch, the mattes just feel really dry. They blend, they're not super saturated and super pigmented. I find that they blend really nicely together, and I don't really have an issue with like the layer or the blend, but they just feel really dry. I was concerned that they weren't gonna last a super long amount of time, but I have had no issues in terms of them lasting throughout the day. And then I kind of feel the same about the shimmer shades. I'm getting a bit of hard pan on this shade right here, Roaring Lions, and a little bit on Nile Crocodiles as well. I just find that the metallics don't feel super buttery. They're a little bit dry. They are getting hard pan. They still perform on the eyes, but there is, again, something to be desired from the metallics. They're not this like super intense metallic formula, which maybe that works really well for you, but I was expecting this like really saturated intensity from the metallics, which is just not what I got. So I definitely do think the quality is a step up from the original Nomad Cosmetics palette that I tried, but I think there is room to make this quality even better. So 4 out of 7 for quality. For color story, I did give this a 5 out of 5. I absolutely love the color story. I don't think that there's anything repeating. I don't think that there's anything within this palette that could be swapped out necessarily for something else. I think it's a really well curated palette, and I'm really happy with the color story. So 5 out of 5 for color story, and 3 out of 3 for packaging. I know that the like velvety material, as I was just talking about the velvety material from the ABH Modern Run and Soft Glam, I know that it can get dirty and would be annoying, but I think just I think it's just genius for being a safari palette. It's not like super, maybe it will get dirty and it will annoy me, but I love the leopard print packaging, and I love actually that it's like this velvety touch. So 3 out of 3 for packaging. Price per ounce on the Nomad palette is $1.86, meaning that we are docking 1 point for the price, which puts the official ranking number at 11, and this is the number 4 palette. Coming in at number 3, we have the Oden's Eye Jewels and Gem palette, and this is what this one looks like. Really, really beautiful. You guys know how much I love my Oden's Eye palettes. In terms of quality though, I did give this one, what did I give this one? A 5 out of 7. Reason being, I struggled a little bit with the mattes on this one. I struggled with the blues, and there were a couple of these shimmer shades, like the shade Elatedness was just a little bit more crumbly, whereas I think it would have worked better as like not a crumbly shimmer. Personally, that could just be personal opinion. It's really the mattes though that kind of bump this down for quality. It's just not the best quality mattes I've seen Oden's Eye release. I have found with some of their palette releases this year, I have struggled a little bit with the mattes just being a little bit patchy, not layering or blending, as I know Oden's Eye to blend and layer. So I gave this a 5 out of 7 for quality. Color story, I gave this a 5 out of 5. I absolutely love the color story. I don't think there's anything that repeats itself. I think there's a good mixture of shimmers and mattes. I find that I can create full looks with this palette. I find that I can wear this in a number of occasions. Like I can wear this to work, I can wear this out, I can really wear this wherever. So 5 out of 5 for color story. And then for the price of the Oden's Eye Jewels and Gem, it came in at $1.79 price per ounce, meaning we dock 1 point for price, putting the official ranking of this palette at an 11 as well. And this is the number 3 palette. Coming in at number 2, we have the Natasha Denona Glam palette. This, I'm so glad that I finally added this to my collection, just because this is like the perfect, like the epitome of the perfect everyday palette for me. I am more cool toned, especially like when I'm not self-tanned. So cool toned everyday neutral palette is really like just perfect for me. For quality, I did give this a 7 out of 7. I did give this a 5 out of 5 for color story. I don't find that there's anything too repetitive in this palette, and I really think that each shade within these 15 shades really works for this palette. This is like top notch Natasha Denona quality. I've had no issues with any of the shades, and I just think it creates such a beautiful look on the eyes. I did also give this a 3 out of 3 for packaging. Again, this sleek Natasha Denona packaging, you have a really nice large mirror, and then you can easily take the shades out and exchange them with other shades if you are so wanting, meaning that this did have a perfect 15 out of 15 until we get to the price. The price per ounce of this Natasha Denona palette is $3.58, meaning that we do need to dock 2 points for price, which puts the overall ranking of this palette at a 13, which is still a really great score. And this is my number 2. And then coming in at number 1, you guys, I think this might be my new favorite palette in my collection. It is the Glaminatrix Nearly Natural palette. Just wow, I absolutely love this palette. You can't purchase this as a palette anymore, but I'm pretty sure you can get a number of the shades, a number of the singles. You can't get the singles bundle right now, it's sold out. I'm hoping that they do restock, but I think you can get a number of these actual shades just as singles. So I did give this a 7 out of 7 for quality. What I love about this palette is I find that the mattes are more buildable. I'm thinking Viseart vibes, which I don't mind. So they're not super saturated right off the bat, but the color, like the color payoff on the eyes is like true to what's in the pan. I was really, really impressed with the shade Down to Earth, just because I feel like sometimes these like grungy, poopy, greeny shades can really end up being pretty patchy. But this is a beautiful shade, as are all of the mattes. They just take a little bit more time to build if you're wanting a super intense, super saturated matte look. But I personally like that because sometimes I'm not the best blender, so the buildable the better at times, in my opinion. And then if you are just a lover of super buttery, super metallic, very smooth shimmer metallics, you really cannot beat this formula. I was so impressed. It's so intense, but it's the thinnest, smoothest, most buttery metallic formula I have ever used. It reminds me a lot of the Persona shimmer formula or metallic formula, and just that it's so smooth on the eyes. And if you have like dry or crepey lids, you do not get like texture on the lids with this formula. I was so impressed. I also give this a 5 out of 5 in terms of color story. I don't find anything to be too repetitive, and I actually really like the range of shades within this palette. I am like obsessed with the color story. So 5 out of 5 for color story. I give it a 3 out of 3 for packaging. You do get a nice mirror in this. It's not super bulky. I think the packaging is really cute. So this was a perfect 15 out of 15, similar to Natasha Denona Glam. I personally, if I was ranking these, would still rank this one above Natasha Denona Glam as well. So I'm glad that it just happened that way with this official ranking as well. But price per ounce on this palette is $1.98 per ounce, per gram, price per gram. Price per gram, not price per ounce, if I've been saying price per ounce. $1.98, which means we need to dock 1 point, which would put this palette at an official ranking of 14. And my #1 palette out of the last 10 palettes that I have tried. So that is it, you guys. Those are the 10 newest palettes that I have finished my testing for within my collection. I would love to know if you know of any of the new palettes that I brought into my collection. What palette are you most excited to see me rank next? And as mentioned at the introduction, if there's ways that you want to see me tweak this official ranking system, let a girl know. Let me know if there's any other, like, anything else you want me to add. But that is gonna wrap it up for today's video. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to watch and for supporting me and my channel, as you guys always do. I appreciate you guys, and I will catch you in my next video. Bye.